Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if corrupted soul sealed inside of Naruto instead of Kurama? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original stories link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. The night was suffocating. Darkness obscured any possible sight. It was only Kakashi's inane training that was keeping him from just closing his eyes to see if they were any brighter. He shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. The position he and his squad were in at the moment, hidden in a small trench, waiting, wasn't very comfortable. Several of the shinobi with him were talking in low, hushed tones, ones that had fear etched in every syllable. So, my good friend Kurama actually was part of Squad 47, you know. The one that first made contact with this thing, one said. The others simply nodded at this statement. One particularly greenhorn Chunin had particularly wild eyes as he looked back and forth between the three. What do you mean thing? I thought all these attacks were from missing Nin, the greenhorn said. The others fixed him with a long look, before Kakashi spoke up. Figures they wouldn't actually tell you why you're out here. No, we're not ambushing missing Nin, Kakashi said, as the greenhorn's eyes widened and the others chuckled darkly. What you were told was just a cover story. We didn't want the villagers panicking. The attacks weren't from missing Nin, Kakashi said solemnly. One of the brasher ninja there decided to pipe up. Yeah, after all, what man rips off another's head with his bare hands? Another spoke up, or skin you alive. Another spoke, or eat you brain. Kakashi cut them off. No. What we're actually out here for is a different reason. We're here to kill whatever's been doing this. Almost the entire shinobi forces are around here, hidden. When the flares go up, we attack it, Kakashi said. The greenhorn was now very terrified looking, eyes wild like a scared horse's. Biba what is it? He stuttered out. A monster, was all Kakashi said. 2 hours later, not a thing had changed. The shinobi behind Kakashi just continued to jabber on and on about what they were supposed to kill, their speech mostly about the insane acts that it had committed. Yeah, you'll know it when you see it. My friend, Kurama, can't talk anymore, though he's learned a bit of sign language by now. Poor fellow, he's now in permanente shock. The docs say that first chance he'd get, he'd probably kill himself, the unnamed leader said. Wow, man, that's brutal. What do you think he saw? The guy to his left said. The mon's response was cold. The unspeakable, my friend, the unspeakable. Another spoke up. I heard it's as tall as the Hokage monument, he said in an almost awed voice. The guy beside him sneered. Nah, I heard it's actually a god that fell from the heavens and seeks revenge. That means it can change shape and form, the guy said. The others just looked at him like he was nuts. But before any speech could continue, a bright flash shot up into the sky, eerily illuminating the forest around them. This is it, stick close, don't be stupid and retreat when you're told and you'll live, Kakashi said as his squadron took off to the flare's position. As they neared the epicenter, cries could be heard. Cries of pain, agony and fear, both male and female were the only things that were heard, aside the rustle of leaves and the sound of wind streaking past their ears. They stopped abruptly at a clearing. Around them, the bodies of fallen comrades, grotesquely mutilated by it, lay astrew. Kakashi forced the bile forming in his stomach back down, as he began to look warily around. Stay close, this fight's not going to be pretty, Kakashi said to the panicking greenhorn. The Chunin simply nodded as his eyes scanned the area around him. A loud rustle was heard, before out of the bushes ran a ninja. A kunoichi, with dark brown hair, and a scar on her left eye. She was cradling her left arm, which was bleeding badly. She came stumbling towards Kakashi, who was nearest, and began to mumble incoherent words. There, coming, death, she said, before she collapsed in a heap before him. Kakashi examined her and found she was somehow alive, if in bad shape, but he got very worried when total silence descended upon his squad. Standing up, he saw why. It was there. Kakashi was surprised. Despite all the stories, it was actually not all that big. In fact, it was just a bit under his height. It was humanoid, only extremely thin. Features couldn't be made out under the moonlight, but it held the air of menace that no shinobi or warrior on Earth could hold. No one moved as it slowly trudged forwards. Crunching could be heard as it walked like any man towards the squad. It stopped several feet from a large patch of them, and simply eyed them, scanning over all of them. A Chunin spooked. With a loud battle cry, he ran forwards with only training acquired by years of hard work, and drew kunai, preparing to attack it. In a blur of movement, the shinobi fell. His torso missing a large chunk, he fell to the floor with a splat. This was the trigger that sent Kakashi's men into a frenzy. Some attacked out of fear, others turned tail and tried to escape. The greenhorn heeded Kakashi's words and stuck close, and for it, he, along with the woman, lived. The rest weren't so lucky. Blood fell like rain as the death was dealt. Kunai that were thrown carrying towards the figure were sent flying away by a brief streak of light that contacted with them a meter away from it. Shinobi were cut down and torn to shreds by the same entity. Men, women, ninja, were swatted down like flies. There were no survivors as it seemed to attack with speed and strength that rivaled none other. Then, the moonlight caught on its form. This drove all their wilder, fear now the only thing apparent in all but the most battle-hardened shinobi. It wasn't human. It was like a mock skeleton, its upper body a large plate of bony mass attached to a spinal column. Its head was skull-like, razor-sharp teeth in its maw. Covering its eyes and most of its head was a blood-red bandana. Over its legs were baggy, ripped jeans, which struck Kakashi as odd, a large skull belt buckle on them. Diath! It hissed out, turning its head this way and that, as though it could see them. Kakashi barely registered the blow to his chest before he was sent skidding across the clearing, dragging the woman with him. He looked as the monster, in midair, seemed to draw a scythe out of nowhere. Fitting, thought Kakashi. I die at the hands of a monster that impersonates death itself. Kakashi closed his eyes and waited for death. It never came. He cracked an eye open and locked eyes with the visage of the blade mere inches from his nose. The monster's face was peering over its shoulder, looking at something unforeseen. Then Kakashi heard it. Thud, 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 thud. At the last one, the form of a very infamous toad slammed into the clearing. From atop, a form with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a white coat embroidered with flames at its hem. Kakashi's sensei, the fourth Hokage, Kazama Arashi, had arrived. Shooting along in a run that was far above any shinobi, carrying in his arms a bundle, he made his way in a breakneck speeds towards the offending monster. There was no time to react as it was sent flying away, Arashi's fist held forwards. Kakashi's face was that of astonishment. He was alive. The woman that lay beside him breathed in and out, long labored breaths hacking out of her lungs. Kakashi, are you all right? He asked over his shoulder. Kakashi felt a little sheepish, but shoved the feelings aside. Yes, but that thing there is going to have a say in it, Kakashi replied. The Kazama simply shrugged. Take this, I will need it very soon, Arashi said as he handed the bundle to Kakashi. Kakashi was surprised to find that the bundle was warm, and moving the blanket away, his eyes widened. It was a baby. Small, with a small tuft of hair on its scalp. Why had his teacher brought a child to this battlefield? Sensei? He asked, words failing him. Arashi just kept looking around, waiting for the monster to appear. He didn't have to wait long. From above, it descended, and with speed beyond that of a human, swung the scythe it had materialized out of nowhere. Arashi managed to hold it at bay, using skills only the current Hokage could possess. He wasn't a prodigy for nothing. Gamabunta, the toad that he had traveled in on, watched with severe concern. To think, something as small as a human could cause such sheer devastation. If Gamabunta could have, he would have just stepped on the thing, but there were still too many shinobi close by. Arashi parried a large swing. The thing just didn't let up, it simply continued to attack him, one shot after another. It was time to pull out the big guns. A sharp punch at its face, and the monster was sent spinning away, landing in a heap on the ground. A few of his braver troops gave a cheer at this. It growled violently. It was not amused, but it didn't register the explosive tag attached to its face until it was too late. The resounding boom that occurred caused Arashi's ears to ring for a few moments. Loud cheering resounded as more troops laughed in happiness. It was dead. Or so they thought. From the smoking crater, the scythe shot out, spinning like a giant shuriken at breakneck speeds. Arashi stepped back to dodge, the blade coming inches from his nose. As the curved blade swung back like a boomerang towards the crater, a small trickle of blood rolled down the blonde's face. A charred, bony hand reached out quickly and caught the long handle of the blade. It stepped out of the smoke, most of its body burned black. Before all their eyes there, the body of it rejuvenated before them. Black turned back to chalky white, the bandana on its face turned back to its original color, and the broken teeth grew back. Within seconds, it was back to its full potential. It was totally silent as the rest of the living shinobi registered what had happened. The thing, this unstoppable killing machine, didn't die. It was immortal. Damn, Arashi thought. I guess I'll have it use it, he thought solemnly. Oi, Kakashi. He shouted over his shoulder. Kakashi looked up, not wanting to believe that something capable of such a massacre didn't die. Hi, he responded. Bring him over here, I need him now, Arashi said. Kakashi looked perplexed, but didn't argue. It still hadn't moved, but it was about to. It looked pissed, if there was any way to tell. Arashi looked down at the sleeping form in his arms. It was mesmerizing, the soft look the baby had in a blood-soaked battlefield like this was surreal. Handing the child back to Kakashi, he turned back to it. Kakashi, I have something to ask of you, Arashi said solemnly. Kakashi looked up from the sleeping child as it gave a horrendous screech. Promise me that you'll protect Naruto, Arashi said, indicating to the child. It ran at them at breakneck speeds, its scythe raised high, screeching loudly. Arashi began to go through a chain of hand seals, and one last thing. Arashi finished the final seal as it descended upon him. From his chest burst a massive gray hand, covered in seals. Make sure Jason doesn't escape, was the last thing Arashi Kazama ever said. Time skip. 12 years, location. Training Field 42, aka the Forest of Death, Konoha. Sakura Haruno and Uchiha Sasuke were both considered fairly capable shinobi, and had both anticipated that the Chunin exam would be simple. A fight here, Sasuke would handle it. And some thinking there, Sakura was more than capable of handling it, and bam, they'd be Chunin in no time. They had thought that if something that neither of them could handle, their third teammate, Kokuzoku, could handle it. So it was quite the shocker when a comrade so close to them died in the bare hands of a grass nin, not moments ago. It was harder to learn that he had been a spy, sent by the same nin to collect information on Sasuke for some unknown. The man that had killed Kokuzoku liked to gloat about things. The ensuing fight had been swift, and very painful. Sasuke had managed to keep the disturbing human away from his far weaker teammate, but sadly, he was now at the Mon's mercy. Kukakuku, Sasuke-kun, I'm surprised at you. To think, you actually tried to defeat me. He hissed out. Sasuke cradled his now broken arm, crouched low, attempting to stop the pain. Who are you, you bastard? He shouted, his Sharingan eyes flaring in anger. The ninja just eyed him, before smirking. My name is Orochimaru. You Uchiha Sasuke will eventually come to seek me for power. The man reached up, and in a display of disgusting power, tore his own face off. Sasuke felt like retching, as underneath lay the pale face of a snake-like man. Orochimaru truly enjoyed the fear on his face as he stalked towards Sasuke. Sasuke just watched in fear as the snake man bent low to his ear and whispered in it, goosebumps shooting up Sasuke's back. After all, you wish to kill him, don't you? He whispered out as Sasuke's eyes widened. Now, Orochimaru trailed off as he locked eyes with Sasuke. Sasuke shivered uncontrollably. Stay away from him, you bastard! Sakura screeched as she shot forwards, kunai raised high. Orochimaru simply kicked her sharply in the stomach, causing her to keel over in pain. He chuckled at how weak she was, it was just sad. He turned back to Sasuke and ran through a quick set of hand seals. He shot his hand out and gripped the front of Sasuke's shirt, hard. He picked him up, and opened his maw, revealing twin razor-sharp fangs. But just as Orochimaru's teeth almost punctured Sasuke's neck, a loud thud was heard. Orochimaru turned around sharply, dropping Sasuke. He was surprised to find instead of some adversary in his way, there a bunch of black cloth, at the end, a tuft of blonde hair. Uchish. The form suddenly stood up violently, gripping its blonde head sharply. Stupid branches, all slippery, gonna crack my head open. The voice, high, and slightly annoying spoke up. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow at this. Apparently this person had fallen out of the tree, and was generally disgruntled by it. The short figure slowly stood, still holding his head as though it was made of priceless china. Orochimaru snickered, this nuisance would be dealt with shortly. With stealth at Sannin level, he opened his mouth, and out of it, sprang his tongue, inhumanly long and the end muscle sharp enough to pierce flesh. The flew towards its target, and Orochimaru almost laughed as the person didn't even move out of the way of the slithering mass of muscle. His want to laugh died as his tongue came within a few inches of the person. It was like a flash of glinting light streaked straight the offending oral muscle. In a movement not seen to the Sannin in years, his tongue was cleaved in two, one chunk flying away. Orochimaru's tongue retracted, and he covered his now bleeding mouth, glaring sharply at the offending person. The boy cracked his neck. You know, it isn't polite to try to kill someone unless you know them. The blonde said. He turned around, and Orochimaru was shocked at his appearance. The boy was the classic blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid. That was the only visible part of him. His face was obscured by a mask of bandages, and a tall collar. On his body, he wore a long black cloak, making him look dark and dangerous. He hefted up a scythe that had seemed to appear out of nowhere, one that looked far too large for a boy to lift. He placed it lazily on his shoulder, and then fixed the bleeding snake with a cold look. Don't mess with me. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and I'll kick you ass. Yeah, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate mail for writing this. Those that read my other story will probably be life. Oh, here he says he was no time to write, and here he goes, writing a whole new story. That is confusing. Well, actually, I wrote this a while ago, but I forgot I wrote it. Just remembered it and decided. Hey, why not submit this anyways? The character Jason, evil skeleton dude, is actually based on a character I made up myself. For those that don't know, Jason is the god the character Hidan worships, but my interpretation of it is my own creation. I just came up with this design one day and went from there. Basically this guy is what's sealed in Naruto, instead of Kyuubi. Don't worry though, the fox is still in this story. What Naruto has been up to for the last dozen years will be revealed in a few chapters, though the next one will just be about Naruto kicking the snake's butt. As to Naruto's looks, that's for later. Review, Ori shall summon demonic chickens to feast on you CHROMOSONES. Fights lead to questions and surprises back, I know, surprised as you are. I actually didn't think I would update this FIC, but hey, it's mine after all. So why not? You may notice I am in a sarcastic mood at the moment I write this, that'll probably change. Well, you'll be happy to note that I'm keeping up my streak, with only one review, although Jason is now on the favorites list of 2 people, and I got 1 review. So yeah, Ira's happy. Had some free time, you know, surprisingly not studying right now, so I decided to wipe up a chapter. I hope that the fans of Cutting Strings won't be too offended that I chose to write this instead of my slightly acclaimed story, but this is what I'm in the mood to write. MK. Not a lot to talk about at the moment. Wicked bad heat wave going down here. I hate the heat, it really messes with the electrical discharges in my brain, frying my memories. It is a little annoying, sure, but hey, I can deal with it. I'm not really sure if I should be writing this right now, but hey, don't totally care really. I hope that the plot I'm using isn't too rushed, but hey, this next fight scene is either gonna suck, or rock hardcore. Read darn you, read like the bookworm you are, Riyadh. Orochimaru was pissed. No, he was beyond pissed. He had passed pissed 2 hours ago on a bus to Saskatchewan, Canadian province EH. He clutched his tongue as the blood flowed down his chin, pooling down his chin. The blonde with the farming tool just eyed the man like he was some kind of joke. That simply fueled the fire of hatred towards the boy in the pit of Orochimaru's stomach, making the idea of castrating the boy with a butter knife seem that much more appealing. Naruto was done waiting. Oi, you gonna fight, or run, you stupid snake? He said loudly, eyes narrowing at the pale man. impersonating a boy. Orochimaru was now officially pissed. "You little shit," Orochimaru said, flaring his killer intent. Sasuke found himself unable to move as the wave hit him head-on. The blonde didn't flinch. "Oh, yeah, so scary. Would you mind just running now and saving all that spooky killer intent for later?" Naruto said again, sarcasm coming to the surface. Orochimaru decided then and there, no mercy. He had killed servants for far less, he wasn't taking this. Shoving his hand forcibly down his throat, he withdrew Kusanagi, dripping wet with saliva and slime. Naruto wasn't impressed. "Come on, I just want you to leave now," he said. Orochimaru grew a crazed look. "Die," was all he said before he threw his infamous blade at the boy. A quick handseal and the grass cutter, Kusanagi in English, multiplied to 20, firing straight for the kill. It was always fun for Orochimaru to play with his prey before they died, and Kusanagi was a favorite. They zoomed at super speed, cutting the air around them. They drew ever closer to the blonde, coming inches to him. That was as far as they got. Naruto stepped sharply down on the bark of the tree, causing a large wall to spring up and meet the flying swords head-on. The wood didn't stand up long, barely slowing down the poison-covered blades. Orochimaru smirked as the bark was turned to splinters fluttering in the wind. His smirk died, however, when the wood hit the large branch, revealing the blonde wasn't there. Where'd he go? Orochimaru thought. Here's a hint, Naruto said in his ear. The Sannin's eyes widened slightly as a kunai's cold metal touched his neck. The blonde was standing lazily behind him, holding the knife as though it was nothing. Oddly, the scythe he had was now missing. The knife dug sharply into Orochimaru's neck, killing him instantly. Or his mud clone, that is. The mud pooled at Naruto's feet, dark and brown. Orochimaru seemingly materialized out of nowhere, walking calmly, hiding his sheer of hatred of the child. But he was in for a shocker. "Damn it. My new sandals. Crap, now I gotta go all the way back to Waterfall Country. Well, this is just perfect. Stupid Dito Bunshin. Messing them up like this." Naruto cursed to himself, seemingly lost in his own little world. Orochimaru had the decency to look a little offended at the sheer fact he had been blown off by sandals, but moved that aside. "Maybe I can clean them off or some," Naruto said, before the 20 Kusanagi from before impaled him. Orochimaru smirked as he watched all the blades run through and through Naruto. The blonde was dead. Quickly dispelling the clones, the Sannin walked over to the body of the blonde. He got a shock though, when the body didn't fall. Naruto just stood there, his eyes shadowed. Then, they looked up, and Orochimaru was creeped out. Naruto was smiling. Not a smirk, not a, ha-ha, smile, no, it was a, "You're gonna die a painful death and I'm gonna be happy about it the whole way," smile. Naruto reached to his stomach, where the true sword had shot through, gripped the handle, and ripped it out of his belly. There was no blood on it, it was as though the blade had never actually hit. Orochimaru wasn't prepared for that. His eyes widened, as he totally froze up. The child wasn't dead, an impossible feat, that was certain. In fact, Orochimaru could only remember one person with the same skill. He had almost no time to react as his very own sword swung by his head, splitting several hairs off his head. Orochimaru now was giving Naruto his full attention. The sword came around again too quickly, almost taking off his head. Now though, Orochimaru was getting a little worried. Time to step things up a bit. In his mind, he released on 7 gravity seals on his legs, increasing his speed exponentially. Naruto noticed the change immediately. The man that was now just trailing behind was now easily keeping up with his lightning swings. Time to get serious, Naruto thought. Orochimaru was surprised when the blonde jumped away. "Kaitououjou. Thousand sickle death," Naruto said as he thrust his hand at Orochimaru. From his sleeve, sickles of all kinds shot forth at extreme speeds. Orochimaru had to dodge sharply as the blades came close to cutting him down. A quick Kawarime and Orochimaru was farther away, observing the damage dealt by Naruto. The forest was covered in his handiwork, the sharp objects embedded in pretty much everything. Sasuke stared ahead, astonished at sheer devastation of the jutsu taking hold. Sakura was speechless. But Naruto wasn't done yet. "Come out, bastard," he said mockingly. Orochimaru thought he might actually do that, but then thought against it. The blonde was exhibiting extreme potential, and if he was right, he was a greater host than Sasuke could ever be. It was time to test this boy. Orochimaru quickly made a clone, and sent it out. The clone landed on the branch, and turned to Naruto. The boy just eyed it with no true interest at all really. "What do you think you're doing? Trying to pass off a shoddy clone like that?" Naruto said out loud. Orochimaru smirked. He had purposely made a clone that was shoddy, hoping the blonde would point it out. His suspicions were becoming more and more correct. Jumping down, he landed on the branch with a thunk. Naruto just looked at him like he was an idiot. "Kukakuku, so you saw through it. Such a shame I have to kill you now," Orochimaru said as he released the second set of weights on his gravity seals. Orochimaru was now almost twice as fast. The man blurred away from his position, and Naruto didn't even blink before he was sent hurtling backwards, an indent of a fist in his face. He rolled away, before coming to a stop, laying on his chest. In Orochimaru's hand was his trusty sword, which Orochimaru stuffed down his throat again. Orochimaru wasn't surprised. The boy was not invincible, he could be knocked out. Reaching behind, Orochimaru grabbed a kunai and took it out, advancing towards his prey. He raised his arm high, and Sakura screamed as he swung the kunai down on Naruto. Naruto's hand shot up and caught his wrist. Orochimaru's eyes widened as Naruto stepped onto one knee, almost kneeling, while still holding his wrist. Naruto's face was not visible under the mop of spiky hair he had. Naruto's breathing was haggard, coming out labored. As Naruto raised his head, Orochimaru got a good look at his face. His eyes had violently changed. Red seemed to flow from the left side of each eye, his irises turning white. As the man watched, mesmerized, the red slowly bled into white, his irises changing back to their original state. Orochimaru got back in touch with reality as a fist slammed into his exposed ribcage. He was sent flying away, winded, as Naruto lowered his hand. Orochimaru stood up, he found himself slightly winded. He personally despised the chakra restrictors he was wearing, but they were necessary to keep his profile low. If it had been any other day, he would have crushed the boy. Naruto's breathing had calmed down to normal. He stood tall now, what had happened between him and Orochimaru unseen between Sasuke and Sakura. "Angles rock like that. Fine bastard, you don't want to leave, K. You asked for it," Naruto shouted, Bifro raising his right hand. From it, a tiny black ball formed. This ball stretched into a pole, and from one end, a long, thick blade made for slicing sprang out. Orochimaru decided to move, but found himself unable to for some odd reason. His arms had become stiff, his legs unmoving. Naruto swung the blade behind him, shifting his body into a crouch. He hunched his back, ready to spring. Then he did the unexpected. He tossed the long weapon into the air, and began to run through a long chain of hand seals. As the scythe descended, Naruto shouted the name of the technique. Yuuenkatattoyokoana. Grand Cutting Tunnel, Naruto shouted. He caught the scythe, and swung it behind again. Then he disappeared. For 1 second, all that could be heard was silence. Then the jutsu kicked in. It was chaotic. 1 second, everything was fine, the next, it was like being in a typhoon. A typhoon with swords. Leaves, trunks, wood and the occasionally unlucky bug were cut to ribbons. Wind wiped Sakura's hair, as they covered their faces. Small cuts seemed to appear on them almost like magic. Orochimaru was hit the worst though. He was at the epicenter as he was hit by the spinning cyclone of death and destruction. His skin was bleeding badly, his clothes in tatters. He raised his arms to protect his face, though it was futile. One final hit, directly in his stomach, and Orochimaru's now bloodied mass was sent hurtling into the tree trunk, almost being sent straight through it. The man slid down in a heap, a snarl on his lips. Naruto materialized back to where he had been standing before, and collapsed onto one knee, breathing heavily. He himself was covered in slashes, though no blood flowed from his wounds. Sakura slowly stood up. Sasuke remained sitting. In his chest, a flame of jealousy was lit, too small to notice. Orochimaru was not dead. In fact, he was fairly alright. He'd live, although he would have to fight another day. But, before he left, he stood up slowly, the life-giving liquid that kept him alive flowing out of his wounds. Naruto was still breathing heavily, his body clearly suffering from chakra exhaustion. Orochimaru took his chance. His head shot forwards, and clasped sharply onto Sasuke's neck. Sakura screamed in fright at this maneuver, although Sasuke screamed louder when the seal took effect. Clasping his shoulder as Orochimaru's head retracted, Sasuke collapsed on the ground, holding his shoulder defensively. Sakura was at his side, fightfully examining the wound. It didn't look too bad, though a mark appeared on Sasuke's neck, one that resembled the 3 tomos of a Sharingan. Orochimaru lifted his battered arms and ran through a quick hand seal. He slowly stepped back into the broken tree trunk, merging with it. As he left, a threat and a promise was proclaimed by him. Sasuke, you will seek me out for more power, and you boy, I shall have your head, he said threateningly. Under Naruto's breath, he retorted. Bring it, snake breath. Naruto said to himself as he stood up. His scythe seemed to turn into a dark smoke, before flowing up his sleeve. Naruto walked over to Sakura. He picked a classic icebreaker. So, hi, I'm Naruto, he said. 2 hours later, the two of them sat in a tree hollow. It was large, surprisingly dry, and was comfortable enough to take care of Sasuke. Sakura applied another damp cloth she had brought to that damned forest for one reason or another. It had been a good call. Naruto was sitting across from her, lazing about. He didn't look too interested in his surroundings, although Sakura noted that every few minutes his eyes would scan the surroundings. He was keeping watch. Kokuzoku had been fairly good at doing that as well. The thought of her old teammate kind of downed her thoughts. He had been a comrade. He had fought with them in Wave. He had nagged her a few times for a date, and sure he was annoying. But darn it, he was a friend. She couldn't believe that someone so close to her could be a spy that only wanted information. A stray tear ran down her cheeks. Naruto didn't seem to notice. She looked over at the walking enigma. What had he been doing in the forest in the first place? He had no teammates, nor did he have a headband. Though Sakura had to admit, he had some really cool jutsu. That tunnely thing had been fairly over the top though, some of those cuts smarted. She eyed the boy, who was currently poking a slug with a stick. He was interesting, he sure was. He could have passed himself off for cool badass, had he not had the personality of a loud-mouthed idiot. His abilities themselves were deathly, and seemed to revolve around the same theme. It wasn't uncommon for shinobi to do that. Copycat Kakashi and Jiraiya the Toad Sannin were prime examples. Though a death theme was rare, shinobi tried to avoid that theme for good reasons. It made them stick out too much. Deciding to end the silence, she tried to have a conversation to pass the time till she had to change Sasuke's wet cloth. So, Naruto, what are you doing in Konoha? She asked. The blonde jumped at her voice, before turning around in alarm. He calmed down for a second, before shrugging and sitting down. On the slug. After a quick clean-up, Naruto sat back down, only this time, not on a slug. Actually, I'm a little lost. Do you know where Lightning Country is? He asked sheepishly. Sakura facepalmed hard on the ground. Lightning Country was not hard to find, it was in the exact opposite direction Naruto had been traveling. I have a map if you want, she said. Naruto seemed incredulous, before nodding. She reached into her pack and removed a scroll, and handed it to him. It turned out it was a map of the continent. Oh, so South doesn't start with N. Naruto said out loud like it wasn't the most obvious thing in the world. Sakura had the decency to deck him for that one. With a large bump on his head, Naruto also had some decency, to look scared as hell of the pink-haired girl. His eyes were wide as he tried his best to stem the swelling. Sakura had managed to calm down. Okay then, why do you want to go there? She asked pryingly. Naruto simply smiled under the bandages. Why not? He said, shrugging. Sakura raised an eyebrow at that comment, though she let it slide. Okay, one more question, what's with the scythe you have? She asked. Naruto grew serious at the comment. What's wrong with it? He asked, Sakura becoming alarmed. No. That's not it. It's just a really interesting weapon is all. She had managed to save herself with that one. Naruto seemed to glow with pride at her comment. It is, isn't it? Here. He reached behind his back and seemed to pull the scythe out of a holster on his back, despite its blade being far too large to fit into any kind of sheath. He handed it over to Sakura, who found it surprisingly light. It was heavy, that was for sure, although not as heavy as something of that size should have been. She found it flexible, and the blade sharp, made for slicing. The amazing thing was it was inscribed. On the blade, in small kanji, it said, Kire Kire Hucho. Chop chop cleaver, at least I hope it is. Sakura examined the simple cutting machine, taking in its simple design. The simple blade was attached to a long black pole, a metal ring at the top to attach it. Though Sakura could kind of tell that something was not right about this thing. She handed it back to its owner, Naruto. Naruto simply smiled, before he had the scythe turn into smoke again and flow up his sleeve. Sakura's eyes widened. That wasn't something you expected a scythe to do. The silence was almost deafening as Sakura placed another cloth onto Sasuke's burning forehead. His condition was getting worse. He could die soon if she didn't figure out what his ailment was. If things continued like this, Sasuke would die. Naruto stood up. I'll go find some firewood. You keep an eye on him, Naruto said. Unbeknownst to him, 3 pairs of eyes watched them closely. What the hell happened here? Naruto said out loud as he trudged back to the clearing, several wood logs in his arms. He had walked back not too long ago, and come to a rather smashing scene. Sasuke was up, and looking fairly agitated. Sakura was far worse, covered in some light bruises, cuts, and her hair was horribly shaved off, leaving it lopsided. Naruto took note to the small force of shinobi around. All of them Naruto was unfamiliar with. One of them, a boy in green spandex with a bowl cut and huge eyebrows, was being shook awake by a girl in classic Chinese clothes, her hair in buns. He seemed to bounce back, proclaiming loud nonsense into the air. There was another pack of them by a bush, a blonde like him wearing purple, a husky kid, cause saying fat is rude unless said person is a jerk about it, with swirls on his cheeks, and a lazy-looking guy with a pineapple haircut. Some guy with white pupils and long hair landed beside the girl that had been shaking eyebrows. The guy looked like an arrogant prick. Said boy walked up to Bullcut, who was currently apologizing to Sakura about something. Lee, you idiot. We told you to meet us by the tree half an hour ago, and yet you almost get yourself killed. White Eye said. Gomen Nasai, Neji-kun, but I needed to protect Sakura-san. Lee said. Naruto raised an eyebrow, his persona still not noticed. So, the spandex-wearing kid was named Lee, and the prick Neji. That left out the girl with the buns, and the second team. Neji suddenly twitched. You over there, you can't hide from me. Neji proclaimed loudly, pointing at Naruto. Naruto's sweat dropped. I wasn't hiding, was all he had to reply with, making Neji flush in anger, and Buns to snicker. Well then, WHO or you? Neji tried to recover. Naruto just shrugged before trotting forwards and setting down the firewood by Sakura. Sakura fielded this question. This is Naruto, she said, indicating to said blonde, who was currently poking a fly with a stick. He saved me and Sasuke a little back from this insane snake guy. She trailed off. It was Lee that continued the game of 20 questions. Nay, Sakura-san, but, where is Kokuzoku? Lee asked innocently. Sakura and Sasuke, who had just leaned against the tree, stiffened. He's dead. Sakura said sadly. Everyone there grew sober, save Naruto, who didn't seem all that shocked. The blonde-haired girl ran up and hugged Sakura. Sakura's eyes widened, before they seemed to relax, and then she burst into silent tears in the girl's arms. Sasuke scowled. He didn't need to be comforted by someone to deal with a friend's death. He had dealt with worse. Sakura broke the hug she had with the girl, and smiled. Thanks Ino, she said. The blonde Ino just smiled. Any other day an Ino would have told Sakura to take a hike, but at the moment, rivalries were put aside for mourning. Naruto again seemed indifferent to this. He just continued to poke stuff. Sasuke's eyes traveled over the boy as his back was turned from him. Jealousy flared slightly in him, though he didn't recognize the emotion. He had never felt it before. The skills he had shown were above his own, and he had defeated someone that he couldn't have. This wouldn't do at all. With a simple goodbye, the other teams left. With a canopy of trees hanging above, the firewood forgotten, they started the trek to wherever. With some luck, Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto made it through the forest. It was by sheer luck that they ended up walking in on some really sucky rain nin, and ended up getting the second scroll they needed. Well, Sakura and Sasuke anyways. Naruto was just there because he had nothing better to do. The fortress loomed over the horizon, and as they neared, Naruto came to an abrupt stop. Sakura and Sasuke raised eyebrows at this. "What is it?" Sasuke asked shortly. Naruto just shrugged. "You guys are fine without me right now. I have to go somewhere," Naruto said simply. Sakura's eyes widened, while Sasuke didn't seem that much affected. "Head to the tower, I have to go," Naruto said as he took off. Sakura waved goodbye, Sasuke giving a slight wave as he turned back to their current goal. 20 minutes later, they were at the tower. Heading into the door, they came to a fairly large room with pillars, a bulletin board on the far wall with something tacked into it. On it, there read a poem that Sasuke easily solved. Opening the scrolls, they set them on the ground. After a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a small pop was heard, before smoke billowed forth from the skulls. From the mass of smoke stepped out Kakashi. "Yo! Where's Kokuzoku?" he asked, eyebrows up. Sakura sighed. "He's dead." She let the words sink in. Kakashi became sober at this, looking down. "That is unfortunate. Although news has already reached us that he was a spy," Kakashi said. Sakura nodded. Sasuke simply flipped his hair, like the emo he is. "So, did anything else happen?" Kakashi asked, trying to get off the subject of death and betrayal. To some, he was taking it too easily, but Anbu were given special training to suppress emotion, and Kakashi had already lost a lot. He was just used to it. "Yeah, we met this weird ninja," Sakura said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "You'll have to be more specific. There are a lot of weird ninja out there," Kakashi said simply. Sakura sighed. "Darn it, what was his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Almost like some author somewhere is trying to stop me from remembering because he or she wishes to build tension to captivate their audience. The magnificent it snickers." Like a light bulb, Sakura's head shot up. "Oh yeah, Naruto," she said out loud. Kakashi blanched. His eyes were wide, his mouth open, held up by his mask. "Tth, that's not possible," he said out loud. Sakura and Sasuke just gave him an odd look, before indicating to elaborate. "How so?" Sakura asked. Kakashi was sober again. "The reason is simple, Uzumaki Naruto can't be here because he's been missing for 12 years, Kakashi said in a hushed tone. "The ending was rushed, you can see it if you look close enough. But still, thought that this was going well enough. If there are people that have a problem with it, just write a review. I am not above flaming, although if there isn't a good enough point to it, then I will simply ignore it. For that is my way." Naruto's absence will be explained partially next chapter, although there may be another time skip, I don't know. As to why Naruto wants to go to Lightning Country, that is actual L explained, because he can. Besides this, not much to write about. So yeah, review, or I shall sing like a Spanish canary. A very pretty canary. Who is this, Naruto? Besides this, I received some good reviews. Fans are taking well to the concept, and have pointed out how original it is. I get that a lot, but nonetheless, I still appreciate the praise. Other than this, the plot will thicken, and Naruto's person will become clearer. Read. ORI shall place attacks on gumdrops and gummy bears. Sakura watched the match below, her mind on other things. Down below, Shikamaru, or Pineapple Kid if you're wondering, was fighting one of the girls that had attacked her in the forest. Kin something. Her mind was not really there up on the balcony, watching the fight below. She wasn't there when Kin tried to turn Shikamaru into a pincushion. She wasn't there when he in turn bashed Kin's head into a wall with a well-placed shadow bind. Where her mind was on the enigmatic blonde Naruto. It was just shocking really. Someone that has been missing for 12 years suddenly up and appears in Konoha with no real reason at all. It didn't make sense. Why had Naruto all of a sudden been so keen on staying away from them once they had been close to the tower? Had he not wanted to be caught? Why not? Too many questions. Her head still hurt from that shot that Ino had gotten in on her face during the exams. It throbbed quite badly. Beside her, the girl Hinata watched the ensuing fight between a boy from the mist being trounced by her teammate, Kiba. Truthfully, Hinata scared her. She was considered an ice queen, very O-part right here, and for good reasons. While she may look meek if you simply looked at her, she would change that in a second with her attitude. The only person that measured anywhere near her coldness was Neji, and his ass had a 12-foot pole shoved up it. That parka she wore, and the bowl-cut hair really mislead people. She looked disdainfully down at the match as Kiba decked his opponent to the floor. Kiba, her teammate, was a brash guy, one that also wore a parka and fought with his dog, Akamaru. She as a person was not truly satisfied with Kiba's performance. From the looks of it, she was scowling dangerously. As Kiba ran up the steps, he was greeted by said teammate, along with their other member, Shino. He walked up, smiling like an idiot at the victory. "Awesome. Did you guys see that? That was easy," Kiba shouted, not unlike a certain blonde. Hinata shot him down. "What are you talking about? You simply dragged out an unnecessary fight. All you did was slow down the inevitable. You will probably lose next round. You should hope that you don't face me in the next. I'll crush you," Hinata said snidely, walking off. Kiba seemed depressed now, his very soul sucked out. Shino sighed silently. Sometimes, Hinata was too cruel. She was tolerable sometimes, but really, there was a point when he felt like simply quitting his own team. She could be quite the royal bitch sometimes. Sakura watched all this transcend, and frankly, she was glad that all she had to deal with was Sasuke when he was in one of his stoic moods. At least he was quiet. Her mind turned back towards the enigmatic blonde. Kakashi walked hurriedly down the hallway leading to the Hokage's office. His eye was trained straight forwards, his back slightly hunched. He slowly leaked out a small amount of killer intent. It was quite plain that Kakashi was not in the mood for fun. Walking up to the door of Sarutobi, the current fire shadow, Kakashi was suddenly stopped by a shrill voice. "I'm sorry to say, sir, but you have to have an appointment to speak with Hokage-sama, and I'm afraid that he is currently busy," a stereotypical receptionist said. Kakashi just fixed her with a stare loaded with killer intent, making her sweat slightly. But I think that IC can buzz you in," she said nervously. Kakashi just nodded. The woman pressed a button on her desk. The door was now openable. Kakashi stepped into the spacious office. The door snapped shut as Kakashi strolled in. He was greeted by an elderly man, old with liver spots, sitting behind a large desk, speaking to another man, who was wearing a blue version of the Hokage robes. The Cage, esteemed leader of the Hidden Sand. "Kakashi, what is it that is more important than the exam plans?" Sarutobi said, annoyed that one of his best Junin had to barge in at such a crucial moment. "Hi, Hokage-sama, but there is news that I must address," Kakashi said sternly. "News that can wait," the fire shadow said, crossing his fingers together and propping them up against his face. "Yes, actually, apparently, Orochimaru was in the testing area and," Kakashi said. "I am well aware of that, Kakashi. As of 4 hours ago I knew this. Now if you don't have anything new for me, then please leave," the man said. "Naruto was there as well," Kakashi said in a low voice. The Hokage froze, his eyes wide in shock. "What do you mean, Naruto was there as well?" The Cage piped in, his eyes scanning the two suspiciously. "I'm afraid that I will have to ask you to leave, Cage-sama. This news is sadly in dire need of assessment," the Hokage said like a businessman, the Yondaime. Cage looked a little miffed that he was being kicked out, but consented. He'd wring the information out of the old fool later. As the door snapped shut, the old man turned back to Kakashi. "Are you sure it was him?" he said. "Absolutely. There is only one person on Earth with a name as odd as that, not to mention my students described his appearance. It's definitely him," Kakashi said. The Hokage gave a long sigh, closing his eyes. "This is an unforeseen surprise. Do you think he is still in the village?" the man asked. "I doubt it. Sakura mentioned he was headed for Lightning Country," he said. The Hokage visually paled. Lightning Country? This is bad. If Naruto, or his history, is discovered, the Raikage will take full advantage of the opportunity to acquire someone with power like he has. We need to find him. It is dire that Jashin doesn't fall into enemy hands," the man said softly. Kakashi nodded. "What if he has already made it outside borders?" he asked. Then we will take drastic action. We'll send out the hunter nin to take him down. Better there's no weapon than a weapon in the hands of the enemy, the old man said gravely. Kakashi looked a little shaken. Isn't that a little harsh? He asked. In dire times like this, with Orochimaru looming, we can't afford to have strong enemies. We must not let the fourth's legacy become the very thing of our destruction, the ever-aging man said in a sober voice. Hi, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said, before disappearing in a puff of smoke. On the outside of the door, the cage stopped eavesdropping. This weapon, Naruto, sounded very interesting. Perhaps he would be a good something to test Gaara on. With this thought in mind, he turned and set out to find any information on Naruto. Far away, Naruto sat in the one place that not a single shinobi would have ever suspected him to be. He wasn't in some secret hideout. He wasn't in a small hole somewhere. He wasn't running at top speeds through a tree canopy, hoping against hope that the hunter nin didn't catch up to him. Oi, old man, another bull. He was in the very heart of Konoha village, enjoying a large bowl of ramen. The Anbu to this day still hadn't figured out how he escaped their grasp as they searched high and low through the entire forest surrounding Konoha. Old man Tucci was the forementioned old man, who was amazed at the sheer amount of ramen that was being packed down by the strange black-wearing blonde in front of him. Beside the boy, leaning on the counter, was a massive scythe, one that was fairly plain, aside from its size. What was really perplexing for the man, though, was the lakes of ramen the boy was eating. Tucci placed another bowl in front of the boy, who, quicker than the man could see, scarfed the stuff down. 1 second there was ramen in the bowl, the next it was empty. Naruto was in pure bliss. It had been far too long since he had eaten, and this dish he had just stumbled on was delectable. It was better than those pickled seal eyes he had eaten in Snow Country, and those were awesome. This soup thing, ramen, was definitely on his list of best food ever conceived. Beside him, a flap was heard as a chunin by the name of Amino Iruka stepped in. He was surprised to find a boy sitting in his usual spot, one that was inhaling bowl after bowl of ramen. The large stack beside him suggested that the boy had been there for a while, and from the rate he continued to eat, he was going to be there for a lot longer. Half an hour later, and Iruka's eyebrow was twitching slightly as he continued to watch the small child eat still more ramen. He was at 67 bowls, each bowl holding about 2.5 L of ramen. That meant that Naruto had eaten about 167.5 L of ramen in the course of an hour. And he was still going strong. Suddenly, Naruto stopped and quivered slightly, totally motionless. Tucci had seen this before. This was the part when the impossible amount of ramen eaten shot back up through the person's throat hole, a method commonly called barfing. Naruto twitched, before his cheeks expanded, his face turned red and he clutched his stomach. B B B B B B U R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R R P P P P P P P P P P P P P was heard throughout the entire village as Naruto let loose a colossal belch on that shook the very village, causing many to go into a panic. Iruka and Tucci, along with his daughter Ayami and random pedestrian number 7, were all slightly deaf from the noise as Naruto sighed loudly satisfaction. His eyes fell on the odd looks he was getting, especially from Iruka. "Oh, sorry, excuse me," he said, apologizing for the belch. Massive sweat drops all around. Iruka had to get to know this kid. He was by far the most interesting thing to happen to him since yesterday, when some kid detonated a smoke bomb in his pants. "So, are you a ninja?" Iruka used the classic icebreaker. Naruto turned to him slowly, fixing him with a calculative eye. He seemed to nod to himself, before answering. "I have no idea," he said, making Iruka faceplant. "What do you mean you have no idea?" he shouted, making a woman and her child passing by run away frightened. Naruto just shrugged. "Well, on the one hand, I am capable of using jutsu, and I also am well acquainted with several killing styles. But on the other hand, I don't belong to a village, not do I have an identification head. Band all ninja have. So I'm kinda tied, got the skills, don't have the papers," Naruto said, explaining his answer. Iruka just stared at the blonde like he had grown an extra head. "Alrighty then, guess that answers my question. So why are you here anyways? Going to join the village?" Iruka asked as Naruto dug into his bowl of ramen. Naruto just gave him a look. Not in this lifetime, was all he said, leaving it at that. Iruka wasn't satisfied. Why's that? Is there something wrong with being part of a village? He asked. Naruto didn't look at him, but his eyes darkened. I've had bad trouble with loyalties, Naruto said, leaving it hanging. Iruka just raised an eyebrow. This kid was like an emotional freight train, 1 minute a happy idiot, another a philosopher, and the next, he was some dark, depressed emo. He was an odd one, this Naruto. A clunk was heard as Naruto dug back into his ramen, this time slower. Iruka was surprised to find that when Naruto ate, he didn't remove the mask he was wearing. Instead, he simply opened his mouth, and a patch of bandages opened like a second layer of skin, one that Naruto could slip the noodles through. It was interesting. On closer inspection, Naruto also appeared to tighten his lips, covering his teeth. Even more interesting, you eat oddly, did you? Know that? Iruka said. Naruto just eyed him, before shrugging. So, you look odd, you don't see me saying anything about it. Naruto said curtly. Iruka bristled at that comment. I was just pointing something out, Iruka said, a large frown appearing on his features. It is considered impolite to point things out that are different about people, is it not? Naruto asked. Iruka sighed loudly. I'm sorry, it just was something I thought I should point out, he said simply. Let's start over. I'm Iruka, he said, shoving his hand forwards. Naruto just looked at it, before hesitantly grasping it. Fine, I'm Naruto. The shook on it, the old man looking at them as though they were crazy. The door to the Uchiha household opened slowly as Sasuke gently stepped into the long abandoned hallways of his home. Thin moonbeams shone through the windows, making the scenery glow slightly around him. Anyone else would have panicked, but Sasuke was fairly used to it. Kicking his shoes off, Sasuke sat his bag on the table of his living room as he flipped a light on. The dark shadows dancing on the walls instantly disappeared as the much brighter light chased them away. Walking over to the fridge, Sasuke grabbed a small can of pop, before sitting himself down on the couch. He didn't open the can, simply setting it on the table. His mind was far elsewhere. The battle in the forest was fresh in his mind, thanks to his Sharingan being activated the whole time. Orochimaru cackling as he slowly sauntered over to where Sasuke kneeled. The loud thunk as Naruto smacked into the tree trunk. Orochimaru's ear-splitting shrieks as the spinning whirlwind that was Naruto slammed into his torso. It wasn't fair. He was the Uchiha. He was the one that needed to avenge his clan. He was the one that needed that power to crush Itachi, not some blonde idiot that fell out of trees. What had that boy done to deserve such strength, when it was him that had suffered so? Wrenching pain racked Sasuke's body as he keeled forwards, clutching his shoulder. He slowly swiveled his eyes as he looked at his hand, the hand that was now covered in black flame tattoo like bruises. The seal was active. That was another thing. This thrill that had him when the seal was active, how was it bad? Kakashi insisted that he seal it, yet now that he had, Sasuke couldn't use anything, from his Sharingan to his best jutsu anywhere nearly as well as he did under the seal's influence. It was maddening. The tattoos slowly receded as Sasuke got off the topic of his little failures. There were other things to think about, like how he could improve himself. Well, for one thing, he was much too slow in the battle. So, get some weights. His hits had been too weak. So, start punching the posts more, maybe get a sparring partner. And his jutsu had not been up to par. Maybe he could ask Kakashi for some pointers. The man did after all have over 1,000 jutsu. Maybe he would have one as destructive as the move Naruto had used, the one that started with. Then it hit Sasuke like a freight train. He had watched the whole fight, the entire fight with his Sharingan activated. That meant he had copied the seals to Naruto's jutsu. Sasuke couldn't believe he hadn't realized it before. This meant he could preform the jutsu. This was good, really good. Disregarding his still untouched can of soda, he dashed outside to his more private training ground. Sasuke didn't mind the dim light. He was far too distracted to see if perhaps he could preform this jutsu. Standing in one of the more open areas of the training field he had inherited after his parents' untimely deaths, Sasuke activated his Sharingan. The memory of Naruto's battle with Orochimaru replayed in Sasuke's head as he concentrated all his might into the memory of the hand seals Naruto ran through before Naruto activated the jutsu. Sasuke opened his eyes, before beginning the hand signs. Going through the set quickly, Sasuke ended in the final seal, before sending out a large jolt of chakra. This is it, he thought to himself. Boy was it ever. Almost too fast to see, Sasuke screwed up. His feet shot forwards from under him, sending his head slamming into the hard dirt floor. Sasuke saw stars as he tried to regain his bearings and figure out what the hell had just happened. Okay. He was now on his back instead of standing at a 90-degree angle. That he knew. Obviously he hadn't screwed up, it was the jutsu, so Sasuke stood back up and ran through the same hand seals again. And the same thing happened, again. The next day, as Sasuke strolled up to Kakashi for the day's training that would commence, Kakashi gave him an odd look. Probably because the duck-ass part of his hair was now flat, making him look a lot more like his older brother. Great. About that same time, the Kazekage silently stepped through the door that led to the small hotel that his children were staying in. He himself was in a much larger one far away. Walking past Tamari and Kankuro, whom refused to acknowledge his existence, he still silently walked up to a door that held his third child, in his opinion, his greatest failure. He didn't bother to knock, as he cracked the door open, peering into the dark room. There were no lights on, the windows were shut tight, letting no light get in, creating artificial night. On the bed, was silhouetted the form of a boy that was his third child. Gaara. His features were not visible, only his piercing aqua eyes, lifeless like a corpse, caught him in a massive amount of killer intent. What is it? He said, a long, low drone, void of any emotion. The Kazekage was unfazed. I have some information for you, if you are willing to listen, the man said. Gaara appeared unfazed. What could you possibly tell me that would make me care in any way that you're talking to me? He asked again, still no emotion. Simple, I may have found another like you. I don't know everything, but it appears that the Hokage is hiding something, the Kazekage said. Gaara was silent. The only indication that he was at all affected was that he had narrowed his eyes. I see, leave then. Gaara said. The Kazekage only nodded slightly. He wasn't stupid enough to believe that he could outright kill the weapon he had created. Closing the door with a snap, the Yondaime Kazekage left the boy. Gaara sat alone, staring off into space, not really looking. In the back of his mind, a voice whispered. Rip, tear, gnash, kill, that is what we shall do, my child. The voice said, making Gaara smile maniacally. He was a good boy, he would listen to mother. Besides, whoever this person was, he would enjoy hunting them. So, I was like what and she was like what and the guy next door was like who and then Charlie burst into flame. Thus ended the craziest night of my life. That was weird. Well then, reviews have been good, and people seem to really like this portrayal of Naruto that I have. Some were confused on the plot, don't worry, so am I, and some thought Naruto should be more emotionless, as he's got an evil god residing in his stomach. I'm sorry to say, but frankly I think that Naruto is fine the way he is. Go write your own story if you don't like it. In other news, Jashin now has 10 reviews, hooray. That's pretty much it. Review, you know why? Meetings of all kinds, mostly bad. Draw your swords, load your guns, put on some armor, it's time for fun. The Magnificent It, before charging into battle while playing Monster Hunter. The Rathalos didn't know what hit him. It is with this quote that I bring you Chapter 4 of Jashin. Hooray for you all, I be alive. Some may wonder why I have laid off from Jashin for such a long time. The reason is simple, I came down with a bad case of writer's block, one that hasn't totally worn off yet. Regardless however, I press onwards, being awesome the whole freaking way. Yeah, that's a good excuse. I got several good reviews for the story, many pelting questions like, does Naruto know the rituals? And, will Hidan worship him? Well, I sadly have to withhold this information for 2 reasons. 1. Revealing this facts would potentially remove all the surprise factor of the story, and 2. I only have half an idea if I am actually going to do these things. Kinda sad really. Oh, and before I forget, I finally found out the name of the 4th Hokage, it's Minato Namikaze. So from here on, I shall now be using that name as a term of reference. Now then, about the chapter, neon. All I see is neon, it burns, and flashes. GLARGINHIMENSHIZNIT. Epilepsy. Yarrrgh, thud. The Sandaime was often considered a bit of a wise man. Intelligent, full of experience, and well tested in the trials of life. Some of his higher fans would say that the only thing that could aggravate him was an enemy village attacking. They were sadly wrong about this. There were 3 things that bothered the esteemed shadow of Konohagakure, aside from someone invading his village. 1. Almost inhuman amounts of paperwork with a short deadline. Too bad Minato had died. The 4th would have been the one doing that, not him. 2. People walking in on him when he was at a particularly good part of Icha Icha. And 3. The Ninja Council, probably the largest collection of political windbags to ever set foot in his village. Sighing heavily as the debate about where they should erect the new statue of the Nidaime dragged on, he dreaded when he had to bring up the little fact that Naruto was apparently alive. So, it's settled then, we'll erect it in town square then, along with the other statues of the Sandaime and the Shodem Hokage. One particularly fat man said as if it wasn't the most obvious thing. Another woman, aged and wrinkled, stood up as he sat down. Now then, if that is all, this meeting is adjourned, she said, turning to the Sandaime to dismiss them. To her surprise, however, he just sucked on his pipe, blew out some smoke and sighed heavily. His eyes were shadowed by the ceremonial hat he wore, giving a foreboding presence. Sandaime-sama? The woman inquired faintly, while some of the more restless members squirmed in their chairs. The Oji-san simple kept sucking on his pipe, before setting it down. I actually have some news that needs the council's attention, he said, knowing full well he would regret telling them this. The air about them seemed to shift to a tenser state, one that made the Sandaime even more uncomfortable. And what would that information be, Sarutobi? An almost ancient woman asked beside him. His former teammate and childhood friend, Kaharu Utatane. Sarutobi blew another puff of smoke from his pipe, still somber as ever. Well, as you know, Orochimaru was recently seen inside the Forest of Death, and managed to place a cursed seal on Uchiha Sasuke. The Sandaime said as he blew a smoke ring. The council simply shifted around, their anxiety rising. Orochimaru was never a good omen in their eyes. We are well aware of that, Sandaime-sama. We have already increased our security policy because of this. A younger member of the council said. Sarutobi just nodded. Well, there is a small piece of information that has been withheld from you, at least until I myself could verify this piece of information. The third coughed out as he took another puff of his tobacco. The council members seemed to grow a little aggravated at this. The younger member stood up, his eyes boring into him. And why, pray tell, was this information withheld from us? The very thing that keeps Konoha running, he said, pointing his finger at him accusingly as other members nodded in agreement. Because, according to the information, I know I'm going to regret this. Naruto Uzumaki is alive and well, he finished. The effect was instant. The usually level-headed council was in uproar. What do you mean he's alive? One of the older members shouted. This man, in his later 30s, had been a member of a squad that was sent to kill Jashin, his missing right leg proof of that. While the council had been anxious before, now they were full-blown terrified. You mean to tell us that thing is within the village? Why haven't you sent the armies? The Anbu? Hell, our entire shinobi force after him? Eh? Younger woman shouted, her left arm missing. She had also been on that mission. The Sandaime sighed heavily as the council began to grow more violent. Enough! He suddenly shouted, blasting a massive amount of killer intent at them, freezing them in place. This is why I withheld this information from you all. I have already dispatched a large amount of shinobi to track him down. There is no possible way that a 12-year-old could avoid a whole squadron of our best Anbu and Junin, so if they don't find him, then he isn't actually alive, the elder shinobi finished. The council seemed to calm down at his words, the killer intent finally wearing off. Now then, this meeting is adjourned. The fire shadow finished as he trekked out. The members slowly filed out, talking in hushed voices, most likely about the information that had just been told to them. It was among all this talking, that an elder by the name of Danzo began to hatch a plan. Move it, kid. 2 Anbu said as they rushed past a small boy in their way. Important Konoha business. The other shouted over his shoulder. Turning back to his partner, they both nodded and picked up speed. This Naruto kid wouldn't escape them, even though they were about a day late for the search. Back behind them, the small boy huffed as he stood up in his black cloak, his blonde hair ruffled slightly by their sudden rush by. Stupid ninja. Always rush with them, can't even let a poor guy like me freaking walk in peace. He muttered under his breath as he opened his mouth and sucked down another stick of dango. HHHHHHMMMM. Where to next? Naruto thought to himself as he sat down on the curb and sucked down another stick. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small folding map he had gotten from a booth at the gates. I've been pretty much everywhere except the Hokage Monument, the hot springs and the red light district. HHHHMMMM, he hummed to himself. I could go to the monument first, although the view doesn't look all that good. Maybe the red light district? Nah. No fun there, only lots of giggling women that put out too much. Not my type, he said to himself as a couple walking by gave him an odd look. So that leaves the hot spring then. His mind made up, he finished the last bunch of dango sticks and set off. However, he found his way blocked by a pair of soft, squishy things attached to something. 5 minutes earlier, Mitarashi Anko had few pleasures in life. All she had were her good looks, which she gladly exploited, her love of killing things and, of course, her absolute obsession of dango. In fact, it was probably this love of dango that had kept what little sanity she had in working order. So, she found it quite odd, when at about noon or so, she walked into one of her more preferred dango shops and asked for her usual, when the clerk simply said, "No." "What do you mean, no?" Anko said in a dangerous tone. "Well miss, I'm sorry to say, but we are all out of dango." The clerk, a young woman by the name of Yuri, who Anko sometimes had conversations with, said sheepishly. Anko wasn't pleased. "Then make some more," she shouted indignantly. The woman looked a little surprised. "I apologize, but we're also out of materials, you see. A young man came in here not long ago and ate almost our entire stock, you see. We won't be able to restock for at least a week," she said. Anko steamed before she got a devilish idea. Striking her most seductive pose, Anko asked with a heavy blush on her face, "But I need my dango, Yuri-chan. Isn't there anything at all I could give you to let me have just one stick?" Anko whispered in a small voice. Yuri blushed crimson at what she was implying, tapping her 2 index fingers together. "If you wondering, yes, Yuri is a lesbian, and no, Anko isn't, she just really wants her dango." "Gee Gomen, Anko-chan, but I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about it. I'd gladly take up your offer however, if you're not busy tonight," Yuri trailed off. Anko however had plans. "I apologize, Yuri-chan, but, gotta go find that kid you mentioned and castrate him. Could you please tell me where he went?" Anko asked, quickly changing the subject. Yuri cursed in the back of her mind. Anko had escaped her advances yet again. "Hi, he went down to the Nobunaga district," Yuri said. "He mentioned he might stop by either the monument, the hot spring or the red light district. He was really odd, that one, he looked only 12. Yuri trailed off. Anko smiled and took off, calling over her shoulder, "Arigato, Yuri-chan." Yuri just sat there and waved, still cursing her luck with women. Anko speedwalked along the Nobunaga district, turning her head left and right, trying to spot the kid. She had contemplated going back and asking Yuri what he looked like, but thought better of it. She always got an uneasy feeling around Yuri, probably because half the time they talked, she was staring at her chest. Quite indecent, really. Anko's train of thought was however interrupted as someone walked into her as she turned a corner. Said person had blonde, spiky hair, though his face was currently being hidden by her C-cup breasts. She had the decency to inquire, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" as he unconsciously nuzzled into her chest. Naruto stepped backwards, and to his surprise the something he had walked into was a woman. Quite beautiful, he could note. "Ah, my apologizes, I wasn't watching where I was going, and I seem to have walked into a flower," although, with his face stuffed full of dango, it sounded something like, "Aha, ma a falies, if wasif wafing werf I waf going. Aphi seem tof walft info a floofer," which didn't sound anywhere as cool as he had intended for it to sound. Anko however didn't really notice his speech impediment, instead her attention was on his face, or more importantly, the fact that he had about 8 sticks of dango stuffed in it. This was the kid she'd been looking for, the boy she was going to hurt 10 times harder for even trying to touch her chest, despite it being an accident. Well, I've been looking for you, young man," she said as she reached inside her trench coat. Naruto nodded as he swallowed down the dango and spat out the sticks. Really, for what? He asked again. Anko just smiled insanely. Well, are you sure we can't talk about this like rational people? Naruto asked as a kunai whizzed past the top of his head. Nope. Anko replied, taking aim at the now upside down and tied up Naruto. Said child was getting worried, her aim was improving, and the glint in her eyes said she was going to aim for another, more sensitive place soon. Another kunai shot by, this one shaving a few hairs on his head. Anko was enjoying her revenge on this kid. Though frankly the way he was reacting, it wasn't as fun as she had hoped. He could have at least screamed every time she cut close to him, or showed at least an ounce of fear. But no, nothing at all. Naruto on the other hand was barely paying attention to her actions, only one thing really on it. What the hell is this about? Oi, you, person with the knives, he said, drawing Anko's interest. Yeah, what? She replied back. Naruto thought about choosing his words carefully, then thought about chickens for a moment, then if his stocks had increased or decreased, realized he didn't have stocks, then tried to remember if he left the stove on, only to remember that he didn't have a stove, and promptly forgot his first thought, and went with his gut. Not that that makes any sense, of course. Are you insane, or do you actually have a reason for tying me up and chucking sharp objects at me? Anko's response came in the form of her hurling another kunai at him. I'll take that as a maybe, Naruto said out loud to himself. Anko huffed. Why is it that of all the kids that have to eat all my freaking dango, I get the one that's kinda off his rocker? She spoke in a small voice. Naruto, however, had heard her. I actually prefer to think that everyone else is insane, and I'm one of the only few that knows what's going on, he said to himself. Another kunai, this one nicking his ear. Say, what do you mean you're dango anyways? Naruto continued as though it hadn't happened at all. Anko huffed again. Che, like someone like you would care, she said in a disapproving voice. Naruto just raised an eyebrow. Someone like me? What do you mean by that? Naruto replied indignantly. What I mean is, you ate all my dango, she shouted as she hurled another volley of kunai at him. These ones all missing. She's purposely missing him if you're wondering. Naruto just gave her an odd look. I'm sorry, he said weakly. Anko got a nasty gleam in her eye at his statement. Oh no, you're not anywhere near sorry enough, but you're gonna be, kid, Anko said sadistically as she began to sharpen her kunai. Naruto, however, seemed oblivious, the rope he was tied to swinging gently in the breeze. So, I take it you like dango a lot then? The question, although obvious, seemed to have an effect on the woman, and not the usual where she threw something at him. Why yes, I do in fact enjoy dango, so much so, that I have to end you for eating it all, and robbing me of it for a week, Anko said in an overtly sweet tone that betrayed her feelings towards the blonde. Okay, now hold on a minute. What do you mean I robbed you of your dango? I bought all my things fair and square, Naruto retorted indignantly. Anko, however, felt differently. While that's true, I don't care. I need my dango to get through the week. And a couple gallons of sake, she added inside her head. Because of your sudden decision to binge at my shop, they won't be able to restock for a week. A week that I can't eat my favorite food. The dull thunks of kunai on the wall behind him signaled the end of Anko's rant, though Naruto doubted she'd let him down anytime soon. Look, I can see that you really enjoy your dango and all, but face facts, what's done is done. There is no dango and beating me senseless won't change a thing. Naruto's surprisingly mature response ended. Anko took a contemplative pose for a moment, before shrugging and hurling another kunai at him. Yeah, I guess you're right, but I still feel better throwing things at you until the shop restocks, Anko said nonchalantly. Naruto's sweat dropped. How about I buy you all the dango you want when it restocks? He asked. Anko seemed to stall throwing her next kunai. Alright, fine then, but you also have to cover my expenses for the next week to compensate, and if you leave the village I'll have to kill you, Anko said with her arms crossed and eyes closed. What? No way, Naruto shouted indignantly. Anko smiled widely. Okay, hang there until you drop then, she said as she turned a corner and walked off. Naruto didn't like this situation at all, but he had to admit, getting down was a first priority, and the rope she had him in would take forever to wriggle out of. Alright, fine then, I guess that's alright. Naruto said grudgingly, drawing her attention back to him. Enko nodded, before flicking her wrist and letting fly a kunai at him again. Though this time the kunai instead cut the rope Naruto was attached to, sending him careening into the earth. Standing up dazed, he decided to ask a more obvious question. So, what's your name anyways? Much later, Naruto found the idea of hanging upside down for 3 hours a lot more appealing than what he was doing right now. Carrying Enko's bags he had bought with his own money. Enko had made it quite clear that she was going to take full advantage of his hospitality, making him buy several sets of weapons, none of which were on sale, some new clothes, including a set of trench coats, new fishnet clothing, and new underwear. Very revealing undergarments, from what Naruto could vaguely make out from the box tops. Of course he had to carry all of it, Enko enforcing her "I can kill you with just one look" powers on him. Poor little, technically unkillable, extreme badass, obviously loaded from all the packages, him. Yes, he truly had the smallest piece of pie in this situation. I like pie. Naruto partially wondered why he kept doing what she wanted, despite the fact that her only threat was she'd kill him. Something that wasn't technically possible. Maybe she had him hypnotized or something. Either way, he was stuck with her for a week, so he might as well get used to the fact his wallet would be a hella lot lighter. Well, this is my house, you can hand those things to me, Enko said as she indicated to an apartment building. Naruto hastily agreed, handing the bags right to her. Though to his momentary surprise, the bags burst into smoke a moment later. Enko grinned like a cat that had just eaten a canary as she curled up the summoning scroll she had put all the things in. Naruto looked wide-eyed at her, his fists twitching violently. She didn't actually need me to carry them, he thought to himself, not quite believing what she had done. Enko, however, acted as though she hadn't noticed. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. I should have a list next time, so bring some extra cash, you runt, she said happily as she bounded up the stairs that led to the apartment doors. All Naruto got out was "Ooh," before she was inside with a snap. Naruto stood there in silence for a moment, before falling to his knees and raising his hands in the air. Why? Why God, why? Before pounding his fists into the cement. He needed something to take his mind off his current predicament, something that was soothing. Then his memory jogged. The hot spring. He shouted in glee, bounding off at high speeds. Needless to say, several locals were rather freaked out by this display. Ah! Naruto cried happily as he laid in the smoking hot waters of the bathhouse. To hide his face, he had wrapped a towel around it, as to hide his identity for no particular reason. The water felt really good, he thought, especially after being pushed into such a position like this. Naruto smiled widely behind the towel as he lay back. This was exactly what he needed, an empty, warm bath, with nothing, not a thing to interrupt his me time. Sadly, however, Naruto ran into a slight problem. As he closed his eyes to shut out any possible distraction from his temporary relaxation, he heard it. A giggle. The giggle of someone peeking. Whatever, not like one pervert's gonna change the world. Naruto thought as he tried to shut it out. He couldn't, however, as he heard it again. The giggling. I'm sure whoever it is will be done soon. Giggle. Okay, starting to get indecent now, but I'm sure whoever it is will soon leave. There was a pause. Then a giggle. Okay, perhaps this person isn't going to leave soon, Naruto thought to himself. Giggle. The voice said again. They're dead. Naruto concluded as he stood up in a towel and looked over the top of the fence. At the far side of the opposite wall, sat a man. His hair hung down to his rear, white as snow and spiky. He let out a small giggle, making Naruto's annoyance grow tenfold. Oh! You? Peeping Tom. Those women can't be that entertaining, so stop giggling, Naruto shouted loudly, making the man jump in surprise. Several squeals were heard behind the wall the man sat in front of, cries of, "Curse these insufferable perverts and their constant need to stare at our soaping wet chests as we lay about in our baths half naked. I shall never again come to this bathhouse, for fear of my privacy being invaded." Although this was pretty much cut out by the cries of, "Lechers, $ing pervs," and, "Snoopy, I'm naked, shield me." When the silence finally came, Naruto smiled to himself as the perv seemed to deflate. Hoping down from his fence, Naruto laid back and prepared to find some inner relaxation. He sadly got none however, as a crash was heard, before some long, icky thing wrapped around his torso and wrenched him through the hole in the wall. Sent crashing into a barrel, Naruto could only slightly register the pervert from before standing on a giant toad, grinning like an idiot. Naruto feared that perhaps he had hit his head on something. Well, that was interesting. Peanut butter. Sorry the update was so slow, been writing for cutting strings you see, and I wanted to take a break from it, especially after the slightly less satisfactory Sannin battle. Little tip. People don't really want the same battle they get on television, with only minimal changes. I hope you enjoyed the humor. It is a little random and out 3, but hey, so is pretty much everything else I write. Booyah. I have grave news for all. School will be starting soon, meaning updates will be slower than usual, if they weren't slow enough right. I know, but I can't well drop out, otherwise all the PH psychologists that said I won't amount to anything will be right, and I hate smug PHSYCIA trists. And also, my beta is now going to college, so spelling mistakes will be on the up, at least until I get a new beta. Review, or you make it sad, and when it's sad, it get crazy. And no one wants a crazy it, especially if it knows where you live. Wink wink. P.S. If I actually knew where you lived, I'd send you a gift basket, full of worms. BWAH haha. I ate a pound of sugar, and a gallon of coffee before writing this. YHHHHHHHHA. Chicken is high in fat, and so is walrus. The pervert, the murder, and the kitten oh god, I'm coming down. Hello there, I're being the backest to giveth you da shiznit that you be Deserin. Or if that doesn't make any sense, here's a new chapter of Jashin for ya. That's pretty much it, I'm lazy right now. Read, or I shall. No, wait, still too lazy. And still coming down, such a shame. Honestly, kids these days need to know when not to butt in. The white-haired man spoke down to the KOD Naruto, who was currently looking up at him while slightly dazed. Standing up slowly, thanking whatever force that had kept his towel still attached to his waist, the blonde gave the pervert a glare that some would have found shocking for a boy his age to give. The giant toad that stood under the man suddenly burst into smoke, making Naruto jump back in alarm. The geezer that had been standing on top of it hopped down, and quizzically looked at the blonde, that was at this still glaring at him. What, you never seen someone as handsome as me? The old guy said, smiling at Naruto in a rather creepy manner. Naruto's rebuttal was instant, in the form of a fist to the head. Urusai. What the hell do you think you're doing, putting me through a wall Naruto shrieked indignantly. The guy on the other hand looked offended at his rebuttal. Boy, do you have any idea who I am? I am the great Toad Sage, master of the ladies and world-renowned author, Jiraiya. Show some freakin' respect. Naruto gave him an incredulous look. You're an author? Yeah right, what do you write, dim store smut? Naruto said under his towel. The now named Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at the blonde's question. You honestly don't know who I am, do you? He said, his raised eyebrow now twitching slightly. Naruto just continued to glare at him. Here then, this may jog your memory. Jiraiya said as he reached behind his back and produced a small red-covered book, the book titled, Icha Icha, Paradise. A small wind blew as Jiraiya continued to brandish the book in front of his face, grinning gleefully. See, I knew you'd recognize my book. This absolutely astounding novel is even known by children and adults. I truly am a god. Jiraiya shouted to the heavens. Naruto on the other hand didn't look as amused. Yeah, I've read that book, Naruto said softly. Jiraiya gave a thumbs up, in a much more cheerful posture. And, wasn't it just divine? Honestly, praise from someone so young is quite a sir. I didn't like it. Naruto finished, walking back through the hole his body had made, cannonballing back into the water, leaving behind an utterly surprised Jiraiya. Regaining himself, Jiraiya marched swiftly over to the onsen Naruto sat in, gripping the boy by the towel he was still wearing, and plopping him down on the ground. What's the big idea? Naruto shouted again. All I want is a freakin' bath. What do you mean you didn't like it? Jiraiya said in an overly serious tone. Naruto however was totally unaffected. I didn't enjoy it, he said snootily. Jiraiya wasn't satisfied. You're going to stand here and tell me why you didn't enjoy it, just so I can point out what's wrong with your evidence. he said slowly. Naruto did so gladly. It wasn't very interesting, he said with a shrug. Jiraiya's face turned bright red in anger, reminding Naruto strongly of a tomato. What do you mean it wasn't interesting? His bellow attracted the heads of several young girls, all of whom looked away quickly, as their now blushing faces had landed on the practically naked Naruto. Speaking of which. Well, for one thing, there weren't any fight scenes, Naruto said smugly. Jiraiya's sweat dropped, his anger going out with a poof. There weren't any fight scenes, he said slowly. Naruto nodded. Yeah, there were none in there that I could find, granted I did skim most of the chapters. Jiraiya was still stuck on Naruto's earlier comment. There weren't any fight scenes. Also, the romance stuff was really unrealistic. Honestly, Miko actually agreeing to join that threesome? Not in this universe. Most of it was too unrealistic for me to actually get interested in. Naruto said softly, actually thinking about what he was saying. Jiraiya looked at him incredulously. Unrealistic? If it's so unrealistic, why is it marked as number 1 on the book charts, and is considered one of the greatest pieces of literature of all time? Jiraiya said, smirking. Naruto was quick to answer. No idea. Why is it that people will continue to think something, if they've been proven wrong on more than one occasion? Why do we bother with questions we cannot answer, like if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? And more importantly, why am I bothering asking you this, as it's quite obvious that you know little about what I'm talking about? Naruto's speech ended abruptly. Jiraiya was slightly surprised at the sudden shift of the teen. He'd moved from generally disgruntled to some sort of guru. It was confusing. The hermit decided to get to know this odd kid, though his earlier comments had cheesed him off. Hey, kid, what's your name? The perv asked with squinted eyes. Naruto, however, was now back in his I'm young, and I'm angry, don't like it, WHATEVA, mode. Why should I tell you, you old coot? Jiraiya's eyebrow twitched. He was not in the mood to deal with a punk like this. Fine then, you little brat, I have places to be anyways, Jiraiya said huffily, walking off, his head held high as though he was a king. Naruto just stood there confused for a moment, before shrugging and hightailing back to the still steaming waters of the hot spring. Oi, can I stop soon? The boy's voice rang out at a high octave, catching the attention of a cloaked figure on a rock at the far end of the clearing. The person, possibly male, trekked over, and looked down at the child who was in the process of moving a boulder 3 or 4 times his size. What do you mean stop? You've barely moved it a few yards, the masculine voice said under the shadows of his hooded cloak. The child scowled. This thing's heavy though, how do you expect me to move it? The boy said, giving an example as he tried to shove the boulder, though it didn't budge an inch. This thing weighs a ton. The man stood there silently for a moment, before turning to walk away. Under his breath, the boy said, slave driver. The man stopped in his tracks, before turning back to the now pushing child. Slave driver, am I? He said coldly, not loud enough for the boy to hear. GG ga ahhhhhhh. The child screamed in agony as his right arm was sent sailing away from his now bleeding stump of a shoulder. Hot tears ran down his face as he cradled the wound. I'm still waiting for you to move that boulder. The man's voice rang out from behind the child as he walked away. Naruto shot up from his bed, his face covered in perspiration, his chest heaving up and down. His eyes scanned the hotel he was staying at, turning to the dim light given off by the window. His breathing slowed slowly. Whipping a hand across his forehead, he sighed heavily. Just a dream, he told himself as he shifted over in his bed, his shirtless back cold against the night air. Lying back down, he attempted to fall into a fitful sleep. The next morning, Naruto felt more energized, despite the night's restless slumber. Walking along the cobbled sections of Konoha's more rundown district, he let his feet wander in the direction he intended, the Hokage's monument. Walking up the catwalks, the maze of stairs and platforms winding the contours of the mountain, Naruto wasn't even winded when he reached the top of the monument. The rising sun's rays cast against the sky made him smile, though under the ever-present bandages it was unforeseen. It was nice, up there, nothing to trouble one's mind, nothing to distract him from the contrasting oranges and reds conjured up by the ball of shining yellow gases. It was, in all honesty, The most peaceful moment of Naruto's life. Sadly, it was short-lived, as the bustle of life pulsed below. People began to open shops. Life starting for another day. It was odd for Naruto to see the hustle and bustle of the village. It was very different from the other places he'd visited so far. Mizugakure, Kusagakure and parts of Iwagakure were places he'd visited so far, though non-pulsed with the life Konohagakure had. None of them had the spirit that radiated. It was almost sad comparing them. One long trek down the catwalks again, and Naruto was on the streets, his mood since the nightmare drastically improved. The air smelled of sweet bread, and various deliciousness. Children ran and played. There was life. Then, as he walked through an alley to who knows where, his nose caught a scent: blood. Scanning the ground, he didn't find the source. It was faint though, somewhere up high, judging from the wind. Hopping up to the top of the building, he scanned the rooftops, looking for anything that shouldn't have been there. He found it: 3 people, and in between them, a corpse. Naruto's pulse spiked violently as his eyes spotted the form of a man, dressed in shinobi garb, lying on the ground in between the 3 people. His eyes didn't move, though his heart began to quicken, as a twitch developed on his brow. I need to calm down. Probably get out of here, Naruto thought to himself as he turned to leave, but as he took the step to leave, a presence that was all-consuming almost swallowed him whole. Like a voice, it called in the back of his head. The need for life to end, the want for destruction. That voice, ever hounding, was his voice. The thing Naruto hated but needed. The beast, the devil, the god, Jashin. Wrenching his eyes away, he hopped down to one of the alleys, luckily unnoticed by the Anbu ninja. He was thankful for that. He'd been having a rough couple days, this little problem just one on the long list. He seriously needed a pick-me-up. Spotting the ramen shop he'd stopped into, meeting that Iruka guy, he decided to step in for a moment. The owner regarded him with surprise and happiness. "Oi, Ayami, he's back, fire up the pots." The old man shouted as he wrung his hand in anticipation for this obviously large meal coming up. "Sorry Oji-san, only one large bowl of miso ramen please. I'm not in the mood for much," the normally quite happy boy said. Tucci seemed to flatten like a balloon, shouting behind him, "False alarm." 3 minutes later, Naruto dug in slowly to his bowl, savoring the taste. It was disturbing for the older man to see the boy so down like this, the day before he was hopping mad. Deciding to play the father figure, he sat down across the child and gave him a light bop on the head. Naruto's noggin bobbed up in surprise at the man's actions, a short squawk of, "What was that for?" escaping his lips. "What the hell's up with you?" the man asked bluntly. Sweat dropping a little at his bluntness, Naruto inquired uncertainly. "What do you mean?" The old man was quick to answer. "You come in here fine not the day before, and suddenly you come in the next day, and you're all depressed. What the heck happened to you, my boy?" Naruto was silent for a moment, before answering. "I've just been under the weather since I stepped in," he said. That was part of the truth, a little at least. The chef nodded, his old eyes squinted in thought. Grasping some of his old wisdom, the man chose his words carefully. "Young man, there are always gonna be moments when you're down and sad, but if you remember one thing, these moments will mean nothing. Always remember, at some point all those bad times are gonna end, and when they do, you're going to be the happiest person on earth. It just can take a while, that's all." Naruto nodded in understanding, those wise words on par with his speech the other day. "Arigato, Oji-san. I needed that." The old guy nodded. "Now run along. Go do something that'll make you happier. I can't stand that look on your face," he said. Naruto nodded, and with a fantastic wwwh he ran off at top speeds. It was only after that the old man realized he had forgotten to take Naruto's money for the ramen. Jiraiya's lecherous grin was plastered right across his face as he kept his eyes trained on the latest target of his new novel, a young, exotic kunoichi that had all the right assets in all the right areas. She trekked along under him as he kept his eyes trained on her assets, drooling slightly. The woman had the oddest dress code, one that reminded Jiraiya of a cross between Ibiki, the interrogator of Konoha whom he was well acquainted with, and a seductress. Her purple hair was quite captivating, and as Jiraiya scribbled in his notebook, he was a little curious as to what she was looking for. He'd spotted the woman in the streets not half an hour ago, and had followed her for a while, totally unnoticed thanks to his ninja training. He was thankful that she was only a Tokubetsu Junin, otherwise she might have spotted him, and given him quite a beating. Still though, he'd found it odd that she'd walk every couple blocks, swivel her head around, as though she was looking for someone, and then walk in some random direction. His attention was drawn away from his musings however as his target suddenly sped off at high speeds, in the direction of an intersection a few blocks away. Tucking his notepad away, the hermit ran along the rooftops, careful not to draw attention to himself. After all, it wasn't every day he saw a woman with such captivating beauty. He just wasn't sure how to introduce himself to her. He stopped at a corner on a rooftop, and gazed down at the intersection, where the woman had just tackled someone. He couldn't get quite a good look at whoever it was, but from the looks of it, the person was of short stature. The woman crawled off the squash shortly, and Jiraiya got a good look at him. His heart stopped a beat as he realized who it was. The kid from the onsen, the one that had interrupted his research, was talking to the buxom woman as though he knew her. The woman laughed suddenly, a high, flighting laugh that made Jiraiya's heart flutter slightly. She was going to have a whole freaking chapter to herself as soon as he gathered some more information. Like her personality for one thing. His books were after all based on real life. Sorta, just mixed up a little. This kid could be his ticket however, to possibly one of his best writings yet. You couldn't have left me alone for a day? Naruto said, sighing heavily. Anko just smiled her smile. And miss a chance to make you poorer? Not now, not ever. She said skipping along as Naruto walked farther behind, sulking at the prospect of spending more money. A presence made itself known to him a moment before he was suddenly dragged into an ally, a hand over his mouth to silence him. Trying to wrench away from the perpetrator's grip, a harsh whisper said in his ear, "Stop struggling, I need to talk to you." Naruto recognized the voice immediately, the pervert from the onsen, Jiraiya. "Now, I'm going to take my hand off your mouth, and you're going to answer my questions. 'Kay?" Naruto shook his head in conjunction to his question. "If you say no, I hang you upside down and dunk you in the garbage can over there until you agree." Naruto's nodding slowed, before he grudgingly nodded. "Good." Setting the boy down, and thankful that Anko hadn't noticed, Jiraiya didn't stop for a moment. "I want you to introduce me to that woman you're so well acquainted with." Dead silence. Totally, dead silence. Naruto just looked at him wide-eyed for a moment, before he began to chuckle. This chuckling grew to light laughter, that turned to normal laughter, then full-blown hysterical laughter. By the end of it, Naruto sounded a little like this. B B B B B W W W W U U U H H H A H A H A H A H A H A H A H A H A H A H H A H A H A H H. What the F dollar hash are you talking about, you old fart? H A H A H A H A H A H A H H A H A H A H A H A H A H. Ah ha ha. Ha 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 ha. 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 Naruto finished. Jiraiya's eyebrow was twitching a little by the end of it. Down the block, Anko continued to skip along, unaware of the fact that her money ticket was currently in an ally a little off. Suddenly, she stopped, and looked around for a moment. Where'd Naruto go? She looked around again, only to have her eyes land on a tiny kitten. Squealing in a high pitch, she picked it up and began to snuggle with it, her previous question long gone from her head. "Okay, so let me get this straight, you want me to introduce you to Anko Baka, because you have the hots for her?" Naruto said slowly. Jiraiya nodded at them, his lecherous grin just barely hidden. "What crack are you on, and where can I get some?" Naruto said sarcastically, making Jiraiya sweat drop. "What, is there something wrong with asking a friend introduce him to a beau? 1. I'm not your friend, I never was, and will never be. 2. What makes you think that I'd ever even consider doing you a solid?" Naruto scoffed. Jiraiya pondered for a moment. "Well, I could give you money," he said. Naruto raised his eyebrow. "There isn't enough on this planet that you could give me that would ever make me consider helping you," he said coldly. Jiraiya huffed. "Okay then, if I can't convince you with that, how about a jutsu?" Jiraiya said in his ear. Naruto stiffened. "You're telling me that you'd willing tell me a technique that you know, just to introduce you to someone I don't even like?" Naruto said. Jiraiya nodded. "What the hell am I gonna do with that?" Naruto said, making Jiraiya face fault. What do you mean that you wouldn't need it? He shot right back. Kittens are cuddly. Anko cheered as she continued to nuzzle into the small and defenseless animal that was now turning slowly blue. I ain't no ninja, so why would I need some ninja attacks? I go by my own tune. I don't need to add yours. Naruto said huffily. Jiraiya threw a rather offended look on his face. Fine then, you little brat, be that way. Far be it from me to force a minor to learn something from a Sannin, Jiraiya said hotly. The silence was deafening as both of them stared stubbornly, before Jiraiya finally caved. Fine, tell me what it is you want. I really need a star heroine for my next book, and she could very well be the one, he said grudged. Naruto just gave him an odd look, before growing an evil face. Okay. I introduce you to her, and in return, you have to run down the middle of any road I tell you to for the next week, singing about marmalade and butterscotch. Naruto said. Jiraiya looked at him incredulously. That's it? He said brashly. He'd done crazier things on battlefields. Naked, Naruto added. Jiraiya paled. No deal. Naruto, however, was prepared for this. Fine then. Good luck on your search to find the next unlucky lady for your book, he said, about to walk off. Jiraiya, however, stopped him. Fine, you little punk, he said. Naruto just grinned evilly behind his mask. Call this payback for putting me through a wall, Naruto told him as he exited the ally. Elsewhere, however, the atmosphere was slightly more dapper, namely, the Hokage's office. It is a solemn thing, this news. Orochimaru appears to be far more active than we originally thought, Sarutobi said in a grave voice to the very tense-looking Yugo that was standing in front of him. News of her lover's death was a sobering thing, especially considering the fact that it had possibly been dealt by the sound. With all respect, Hokage-sama, but I believe the best course of action would be to remove the sound from the village, perhaps even the sand. I understand this is rash, but it is very unwise to allow the continued attack on our home, Yugo said in the emotionless tone common to Anbu. The old man simply blew a smoke ring, sighing slightly. I have already thought about what you're asking, and I'm afraid that the exam must continue. Even if we were to stop it, resulting in severe damage to the treaties we have with the sand, but Orochimaru has already promised to start the invasion the moment we end the exam. I'd think it better that we wait until he makes his move, so we at least have some time to prepare. He finished sagely. Yugo only nodded, her grief hidden under years of training. I still wish to avenge him though, she said, her voice cracking. Sarutobi's face grew soft. He could only imagine the sadness she must have been feeling then, to have lost the one you were engaged to. That was a harsh blow dealt. He knew there was nothing he could do to reconcile the poor woman, but his heart went out to her nonetheless. If you need a break, just give me the word, Yugo. You deserve that much, he told her comfortingly. She nodded. I'm afraid I must refuse. There is too much for me to do, what with a massive battle looming, she replied, bowing. The Gigi nodded. I understand. Now, if this is all the information I am to be informed about, then I must return to my paperwork, he said, indicating to the massive pile on the left of him. Yugo nodded, turning to leave when she stopped. Actually, Hokage-sama, there is something that I have to deliver to you. Some information that was passed to me by a few hunter nin, she said, reaching behind her. From her back pouch, she produced a number of bingo books, small novels that listed the names of ninja to kill on sight. Placing them on the table, she stepped back. The frail hands of the village's leader gripped the one on top, the Iwa bingo book, and began to sift through it. What exactly am I looking for here? He asked. He was already affiliated with the current bingo books, although if he had checked the title, he would have noticed that these were the latest out. Try pages 143 to 145. Yugo said, hopping to gauge his reaction. Flipping through the book to the desired page, he stopped to read for a moment. The pipe fell from his mouth as his eyes widened to an exponential level. On the page, there was a poorly drawn picture of a boy about 13 to 14 years old, a boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a mask of bandages. Uzumaki Naruto. Oh no, I didn't. Yes, I just dropped a cliffy the size of Montana. Everything's big in Montana. If anyone from Montana reads this and is offended, I am deeply sorry, huh? The plot thickens, and as it does, there is a question raised. Who should I pair Naruto with? I'm thinking of an unusual pairing, someone you don't really hear a lot. Something out there, though any girl will do. You can vote, though no harem. I have enough to deal with concerning cutting strings. I hope this sates all you people that have been waiting for an update. You've waited far too long for me to finally make it. So here it is. Sorry if the atmosphere's a little jumpy, I gotta work on that. SLLLLLLLUUUUURRRP. And I'm back up again. BUWAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAH  'I'm gonna go play video games. Solve cancer. Tell no one, eat the entire world's supply of nothing and threaten you with something that makes no sense if you don't review. Yeehaw. I'm an ARMADILLIO. ZZZZAAPPPPP. Scenes There, it's me again. Well, after posting Cutting Strings and receiving an overall good review, although frankly I have to agree with the small criticism here and there, but that is beside the point, as this is not cutting strings. The new chapter is up, so fasten your seatbelts, change your adult diaper, and prepare as our awkward yet surprisingly strong teen hero, or so it would seem, sets out to do something. Read my store, or I shall insert random threat here, beware. This just isn't possible. The aging Hokage whispered to himself as he sat back in his chair with shock. Naruto's sketched face stared back at his piercing blue eyes above a mask of white bandages framed by golden, gravity-defying hair. A frown creased the wrinkling eyebrows of the elderly ninja, his eyes set hard on the image. Turning to the information section of the page, his disbelief soared. Yugo, what is the meaning of all this? He said, reading over the information. Naruto, last name unavailable, known as Senpu Karit, the Whirlwind Reaper, skill level N.A. Possible A to S rank. Reward for capture, dead or alive, 800,000 yen. Wanted in Kusagakure, Mizugakure and Iwagakure for the deaths of 27N52C, 17N68C, 78N142C. Kill on sight, do not hesitate, psychopathic in nature. High taijutsu, average ninjutsu, weak genjutsu. N. For ninja, C. For civilians. The Hokage felt fairly sick at that last part. Have you already read this over? He asked the Anbu before him, his nausea spiking slightly. She simply nodded in response. It is shocking to think that despite all of the fourth sacrifices for the boy's sake, he goes and disappears, and comes back after all this time, only to be a monster like this. Yugo muttered bitterly. Sarutobi nodding gravely at her words. So, what do you plan to do about all this, Hokage-sama? Yugo addressed in an honoring tone. Sitting forwards a little as the shock of this new information loosened its hold on him, the fire shadow sat forward in his recliner. First off, if this boy has in fact been spotted near the village, we'll need to prepare our defenses. I want half of the Junin sent out to find him returned, while the others remain. If we can, have most of the Junin who are either recovering or on vacation taken back, excluding yourself, as well as the Junin who have students to train, and a few minor exceptions. You're referring to her, right? Yugo pressed. The elderly ninja nodded. Anko has been rather shaken up by her encounter with Orochimaru, and she is also needed later, when he makes his move. She'll be able to plan the best defense against him, as she knows him better than even I myself. To do so, she'll need some time to recover. Yugo nodded. I'll relay the message. She turned to walk away. Sarutobi turned towards the window that overlooked the village. Wherever you are, Jashin, you monster, I'll find you, and when I do, I will stop whatever horrifying thing you have planned for this village. Whatever twisted evil you have up your sleeve, the great tree of Konoha will stand tall and mighty in its wake, he spoke in a whisper. Marmalade. Jiraiya shouted to high heaven as he tore down the street at high speeds. His naked glory shone out for the whole world to see. Damn that Naruto boy, damn my infernal perversion, and damn insanely attractive woman that I'll do anything to get near. Jiraiya sobbed in the confines of his head, as he streaked past a large group of women coming out of a bathhouse. Over at a small restaurant, Naruto snickered as they looked back at his meal, his revenge making the ramen taste that much sweeter. Anko sat beside him, her face etched in grotesque horror at the pervert's sudden and unexplainable actions. What the hell was that about? She asked to no one in particular, but she received no reply. The other occupants of the food eatery were as shocked as she was. No one noticed Naruto snicker manically. I'm not really sure, maybe he just likes the breeze. Naruto's comment conjuring images that made Anko want to gag. Which she did, making Naruto's smile grow in greater size. That's for making me buy all that shit for you. Naruto thought coldly, remembering the large amount of material possessions he'd been forced to buy her the day before, as well as the severe lightening of his wallet. Yes, revenge was his now, on both Anko and Jiraiya. Oi, what's up with the look? Anko inquired as noticed the malicious joy on Naruto's face. Huh? Oh, yeah. Everything's fine right now, it's all good. Naruto chuckled uncomfortably. Anko gave him an incredulous look, before rolling her eyes and turning back to her meal. Naruto sighed heavily, before doing the same. Just think, 2 more days, and I can finally stop paying for every damn thing she wants. Gama-chan rejoice. Naruto snickered to himself, his luck finally starting to improve. Once his department was paid off, he'd head for Lightning Country. He'd heard all about the Cloud Appreciation Festival, and from the sounds of it, it would be a ball. A tap on his shoulder alerted him of the buxom purple-headed woman beside him. Knowing full well what she wanted, he simply handed her the money for the meal. A ching, followed by a domo arigato miss, was heard as Anko cashed in the money. Naruto just continued to eat, his own meal not finished. It was his 3rd helping of udon. Although he was peckish about the dish, it wasn't as good as that ramen stuff. Oi, Naruto. Anko said towards him, making his irritation go up a little. What? He asked, adding an edge to his voice. Anko huffed. Fine then, I just wanted to ask something, but since you're so snippy, I guess you don't actually want to know what it is. Her voice spoke in a high tone, as though she was addressing a naughty child. Naruto didn't bother replying, simply choosing to ignore her, which of course was a bad idea. Oi, don't ignore me, you little prick. Anko hissed, although this was only met with indifference. Fine then, I was going to ask if you wanted to come with me to the Chunin exams in a few weeks, but hey, whatever. Naruto's ears pricked upwards. The what? He asked. Anko gave him a look. You're serious, aren't you? She was met with silence for the 3rd time that day. Anko sighed. Okay, every 6 months, there's an exam held for genin that tests their abilities, and see if they're ready to be Chunin. This exam is in 3 parts, the final of which is a grand fighting tournament, 1-on-1. Every time it's our turn to host the exam, as each country takes turns to hold the exam at their respective ninja villages. We hold it at the Great Chunin Exam Stadium, where they battle in front of an audience of hundreds. I was wondering, since you've been loaning me a lot lately, if you wanted to come, as, well, you know, as a thank you. Anko ended, a tiny blush on her face. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What, you mean like a date or something? He laughed a little as Anko, who walked around in nothing but a trench coat and wire mesh, grew an insanely large blush and became flustered a little. And no, nothing like that, it's just a little thank you is all. Naruto contemplated for a brief moment. On the one hand, I'd have to stay in this village and Lightning Country will have to wait, but on the other hand, I can see this exam, which I've never seen before. What the hell, alright, fine then, I'll go. Naruto said, before standing up. I gotta go, I need to go secure a room to stay in, if that's the case. He said, before leaving with a wave. Anko remained at the stand, still finishing her udon. It can't be a date, can it? I mean, sure, he's nice, but he's far too young. What is he, like 13? There's no way I could ever like someone that young. Despite this statement, the large blush Anko sported really contradicted that last thought. Up on the roof of the restaurant, the still very naked Sanin cackled to himself. Forget best chapter ever, this novel's going to be a masterpiece. He cackled. Naruto, by nature, was a very absent person. Some could mistake this for stupidity. These people were making a fairly large mistake. He was by no means stupid, quite the contrary in fact. It was just he didn't really care what happened around him, as he was, well, absent. So it came to no surprise to him that he had wandered for maybe an hour, when a loud thump was heard from a little while away. Unknown to Naruto, he had wandered into a training ground, where one Hyuga Hinata was currently pounding the hell out of a mat attached to a stup. Said girl was pissed. Not an overall shocking occurrence considering her attitude towards life, but still, she was angrier than normal. Her cousin, Neji, whom was supposedly a prodigy the likes of which the Hyuga hadn't seen in a long time, was whom she was going to be battling in the finals. The stuck-up pretty boy had a tendency to tick her off this morning. He had the gall to tell her up front, to forfeit the match the first chance she got. Neji, in an act of goodwill, she gave the mat a particularly hard smack at that point, had told her, in a nutshell, that if she didn't forfeit the match, he'd not only attempt to outright kill her, but he also threatened to tell one of his teammates she liked him. She could only imagine the horror at that. She'd seen his team, and the only other guy on it creeped the hell out of her. That sick bastard. Wow, you must really hate mats. A particularly annoying voice spoke up behind her. Whirling around, her Byakugan surging to life, Hinata fixed the intruder with a death glare that would have scared even the most cold-blooded killer. Wow, you should have your eyes looked at, those veins could be tumors. Unfortunately, even the most cold-blooded killer wasn't as oblivious as Uzumaki Naruto. Hinata's glare intensified, but Naruto just smiled under his bandages. You shouldn't glare so much, people might get the idea you're an antisocial jerk or something. Hinata growled. Leave me alone, you cloak-wearing freak. I have training to do, and I don't need an idiot to distract me. I have plans. Turning away, Hinata proceeded to continue where she had left off, pounding the shit out of a mat. Naruto stood behind her, watching for a moment, before he sighed. You're doing it wrong. Hinata stopped for a moment. I beg your pardon, but I think that the day I take directions from a civilian is the day the world ends, she hissed venomously. Naruto gave her an odd look. Okay, but you're still doing it wrong. Your technique is off. Hinata threw her arms down to her sides, turning on the blonde. You wouldn't know a good technique if it slapped you across the face. To emphasize her point, Hinata threw a flat palm forwards, smacking Naruto painfully in the face, sending a small burst of chakra out to add extra pain. There. Name the technique I used. Prick. She huffed, before turning back and continuing her training. Naruto sat on the ground opposite her, blinking several times before standing up. Well, that's an easy one. I've seen this type of jutsu a million times. Hinata gave a start at that. You, what? Turning around, Naruto sent her a large grin. Yeah, sure, this move, I could identify the name of in an instant. Really? Okay, fine. What's its name? Hinata spread her arms out to emphasize her point. Easy. It's a trick question, because the technique you used was so horribly done, it can't possibly have a name. What was the answer? Naruto didn't have time to dodge as a fist impacted his face, sending him rolling away from the now fuming Hinata. Shut up. God. Why don't you just leave? Sitting up, Naruto never stopped smiling. Yeah, see, that's what I was talking about before, the whole leave thing. It gives the feeling you don't want me around. GGRRRAAAW. Yes, that's exactly what I want. Leave you freak. Naruto raised an eyebrow, losing the large smile. Well, that's crazy. Why would anyone want someone as lovable as me to go away? He shot up, striking a pose. Fine. You don't want to leave, then make yourself useful. Standing up, Naruto gave her another odd look. Useful? But I already have so many uses. I can cook, clean, I'm a decent film critic, as well as a top-notch salesman, and I have even more uses. What use did you have in mind? Hinata gave a quick smack to her face, dragging it down at his sheer cluelessness. I need a moving target, and you seem pretty good at taking pain. All you need to do is try and avoid getting hit, and I try to hit you. Tilting his head to the side, Naruto thought for a moment. I don't know. I still have to secure a house to stay in for the next while. Hinata's eyebrows started to quack